Why? Why it is Russia so important for India, not Ukraine? And why we didn't talk about India-Ukraine relations? Why we always talk about India-Russia relations? Why Ukraine is important for us? Not for us, for Europe or for all over the world. So that Russia always supports India. What is the overall ratio of imports and exports between India and Ukraine? Then Ukraine always gains a edge over the India. Hello and welcome on Vivek's Viewpoint. This is Vivek. Why? Why it is Russia so important for India, not Ukraine? So in this video, I will give you the answer of this question that why is Russia so important for India and why we didn't talk about India-Ukraine relations. Why we always talk about India-Russia relations. I know very well that Russia helped us in 1971 war, but we also have to look the second side of the coin because as we are very aware of it that Ukraine plays its own role in geopolitical location and like bread basket of Europe, and why Ukraine is important for us, not for us, for Europe or for all over the world. So in this video today I'm going to talk about India Ukraine relations and the importance of Ukraine for all over the world, as we are very aware of it that Russia always supports India. If I'm going to talk about the 1970 war, we know very well about it. If I'm going to talk about the veto power, then Russia always support India to gain the veto power. So in this video, I will going to discuss about India-Ukraine relations and the importance of Ukraine to all over the world, either in food, either in nuclear power, or either in any other sector. So today I will also discuss the current updates of Russia-Ukraine war. So let's talk about India-Ukraine relations. If I'm saying relation, then relation is a word which made on some basis parameters. If I'm going to talk about today's world, then relations are made on the basis of money or any other sector it will be. But most of the relations in this today's era are made in the basis of money. So we have to start it from the money because I'm going to discuss first about bilateral trade between India and Ukraine. So before understanding about the bilateral trade between India and Ukraine, we have to understand that what India imports and what India exports to Ukraine. So let's talk about that what India imports from Ukraine. India imports sunflower oil. India imports fertilizers. At the time of war, there is a deprivation of fertilization to all over the world. And India imports ammonium. India also imports aircraft parts and engines and nuclear reactors from Ukraine, and iron and steel and plastic and polymers. India imports a lot with a like heavy price. India imports at a heavy price. The materials have high cost. And what India exports to Ukraine? Let's discuss it. India exports pharmaceuticals to Ukraine and machinery and chemicals and food products to Ukraine, and also refined petroleum. Refined petroleum is the main component which India exports to Ukraine, and other things also like broadcasting equipments and packaged medicaments, and like that other things also India exports to Ukraine. So if I'm going to talk about the bilateral trade between India and Ukraine, so if I'm going to giving you the data of recent years, like if I'm going to talk about the 2021, then in 2021, India exports 85 million US dollars and imports approximate 2.1 billion dollars. If I'm going to talk about the year of 2022, then India exports 743 million dollars to the Ukraine. And what India imports? India imports 1.24 billion dollars from Ukraine. If I'm going to talk about the recent year, like if I'm going to talk about the year 2023, then there is an age to India in which Ukraine exports only 0.45 billion to India and imports 1.34 billion from India. So if I'm going to talk about the overall, what is the overall ratio of imports and exports between India and Ukraine, then Ukraine always gains an edge over the India because Ukraine imports are less and exports are very much high to the India. So the conclusion is that that Ukraine always gains the profit and always earn money from Indian sources. So now let's talk about the educational ties, because we have very strong educational ties. Not we have, we had very strong educational ties between India and Ukraine. As of data 2020, there were about 18,000 Indian students studying in Europe, primarily in the field of medical. So after that, in the year of 2021, there are more students in Ukraine for studying. But if I'm going to talk about the year of 2022, in February 24, Russian invasion to Ukraine. There is lot of things about the invasion, but after that, our students, which is studying in Ukraine, faced a lot of problems, and due to which our government worked day and night to evacuate them from Ukraine. There is a statement from James Bond. I'm saying James Bond to our Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. Our government launched an operation which is known to be as Operation Ganga, through which our government evacuated all the students which are stuck in Ukraine during the invasion of Russia. And there is a statement from Dr. S. Jaishankar, the Foreign Minister of India, in the Parliament, that we evacuated approximately more than 90 planes from Ukraine, and this work is really commendable in India and all over the world. So now let's talk about defense. Yes, I'm saying defense. We have, we had defense relations with Ukraine. I know and I am very aware of it that India imports a lot in field of defense from Russia. We import, I think, more than 45% defense from Russia. But we had relations with Ukraine in the sector of defense. Like if I'm going to talk about military technical cooperation, we are engaged in the military technical cooperation, including the exchange of military equipment and transfer of technology and joint production of various military equipments. Like that, if I'm going to talk about training and exercises, both the armies of Ukraine and India held together the trainings and exercises for enhancing its capabilities and to share the expertise to counter terrorism and other operations like that. If I'm going to talk about strategic dialogues, we always had, not always, we had strategic dialogues with the Ukraine. Now, the important one. If I'm going to talk about nuclear cooperation, then Ukraine expertise in the nuclear technology has lead to cooperation with India about nuclear energy, the safety and security and the peaceful use of nuclear energy. As we are very aware of it, that Ukraine has expertise in the field of nuclear energy. I know that you are aware of Zaporizhia and Chernobyl nuclear power plant. There is a disasters. There is a disaster uh, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. We will discuss it later. But right now, the Zaporizhia is active in Ukraine, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. So now let's talk about diplomacy and communication between the two countries. If I'm going to talk about diplomacy, then we had fucking the best diplomatic relations with Ukraine before the Russian invasion in Ukraine. But after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, there is like there is a halt, not a halt. There is a shake. There is a shake in the diplomatic relations between India and Ukraine, because after some time in 2022, when there is when Ukraine loses a lot, Russia gains the power in Ukraine, and at the same time, India buys Russian oil at the lowest price. So after that, there is a tweet there is a tweet from the foreign minister of Ukraine, Dmitry Kuleb, that he said in that tweet that the oil which India purchased from Russia contains the Ukrainian blood, and India have the same on it, that India purchases the Ukrainian blood and funding the war, and through which that Russia gets the incentive to attack the Ukraine. But the Ukraine's foreign minister didn't see the second side of the coin, that Europe's also funding the war. Europe's at the time that Europe is fucking the largest importer of Russian. Yes, the foreign minister of Ukraine has neglected that. So uh, after that Russian invasion till now, there is like there is a like health between the Ukraine and India relations. So now let's talk about the main thing, which is why why Ukraine is so important to Europe and America and all over the world. If I'm going to talk about, let's see the strategic location. Then, as you can see, Ukraine's have a geopolitical strategic location in the Black Sea or in Europe. I think location is the main cause of Russian invasion to Ukraine. But we will discuss it later about the Russian invasion, about NATO and other things are there. Let's talk about that why Ukraine is important. About further, if I'm going to talk about further, Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. It means that Ukrainians play a very vital role in the sector of food to provide food to the Europe, not to the Europe. If I'm going to talk about Ukraine and Russia, both countries play a very vital role of providing wheats and food to all over the African countries, Latin American countries, and most of South Asian countries. Nuclear plant. If I'm going, as I already told, that Ukraine had a nuclear plant which is known to be as Zaporizhia, which is the biggest in the Europe and which provides electricity to most of the Europe areas. Agriculture innovation. Ukraine is a pioneer in agriculture innovation and in the field of aerospace and aviation also. So in these all sectors, Ukrainians play a very vital role. That's why Ukraine is important to the Europe and to all over the world. So now let's talk about the current updates between India, Russia, and Ukraine. I hope you are very aware of it that Russian President Vladimir Putin re-elected as the president of Russia on 18th March 2024. After the result declaration, Indian Prime Minister congratulates the Russian president and spoke on a phone conversation about the ongoing conflict and the progressive trade and other things are there. After that, as you can see in the tweet, the Prime Minister mentioned that we had a conversation between Prime Minister of India and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. After that, after some time later, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also spoke to the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. As you can see the tweet of Prime Minister Narendra Modi discussed about the recent ongoing conflicts, developments, and the trade between India and Ukraine. And after that, both countries both countries invited Prime Minister Narendra Modi to visit Russia and Ukraine and like do something for Ukraine and Russia to stop this conflict and play a role like a mediator between this conflict and make a conclusion of it.